Hey, what's up guys? It's Wawi here, and today we're talking about DT cannons. So this is the first tutorial that I'm putting out in a while, so I apologize to those of you who have been waiting a lot for this to come out. I'm going to come up with a video to explain sort of where I've been lately, but I don't really want that to be in the tutorial, so look forward to that video soon. But right now, let's just jump right into it. So DT cannons. So the reason why I wanted to make this tutorial is because I think with Puyo Puyo Tetris being one of the more popular games, Tetris games that people are playing these days, DT cannons have been very popular on that platform, especially because I can never say his name, Amimaya, Amimaya, Amimaya Tayo, I think that's his name. Amimaya Tayo has very much popularized DT cannons as a good opening, and a large part of that is because you can't uh, cancel incoming garbage in the same way in Puyo Puyo Tetris, and so it sort of lets you do. It sort of backloads your garbage to let you do a down stack combo later on, and so it's interesting. I'm not fully convinced that it's the best opening for Puyo Puyo Tetris, but it's undoubtedly a good one. So let's talk about the pros and cons of DT cannons. So obviously it sends a very strong spike near the beginning of the game, which can make it very good against openings like the center four wide, where you want to make sure you reduce the height of their four wide as much as possible. You should absolutely be able to finish a DT cannon plus more while they're setting up the center four wide, assuming that you are approximately the same speed as them. Another pro is that you can transition very easily into a four wide, which once again makes this a pretty good answer to the four wide in Puyo Puyo Tetris. Possibly. I know some people have been testing that. Um, and lastly, in Puyo Puyo Tetris is one of the best openers versus Puyo in the Tetris vs Puyo matchup. And I want to do a separate tutorial on Tetris vs Puyo, but the short version is you want to make sure you send lots of back-to-backs and prioritize that over anything else. And so the DT Cannon is a great way to start that off versus Puyo Puyo. Also, the fact that it delays the garbage also makes it good versus Puyo Puyo. But that's a little bit more complicated topic, so we'll save that for the other video. The cons is that it wastes the first T, so it makes it susceptible to perfect clears because they're going to be able to get the perfect clear before you can stop them. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing because as long as you quickly downstack out of the DT cannon, you should be able to just send the perfect clear garbage back to them. But it does get a little bit messy. So if you misdrop, it can hurt a lot and get a very messy board on your side of the field. It's hard to recover from. And also, if you misuse a T piece, and you waste more than just the first T, then suddenly perfect clears can pretty much end the game for you. So you definitely want to be very consistent with this opening if you're going to use it. So this is some of the examples of the basic setup that you would use for a DT cannon. This first one over here is TKI's signature. TKI was a very foundational player for Tetris in general. And so a lot of openings come from him, namely the TKI 3, which is the opening you guys see me use in all of my videos, right? So the nice thing about his opening is that it makes very intuitive use of the S pieces and Z pieces, as you can see. They're all stacked up very nicely. You can see sometimes you can even get an extra T-spin triple at the end, which is really nice. And this would be back-to-back because you can get a T-spin mini after the DT cannon is done. And so then the T-spin triple at the end would definitely be part of that. If you're watching these and you're confused as to how exactly this is a T-spin setup because it looks kind of funky, just wait till the end of the video. I'm going to demonstrate it plenty of times. These days, people don't really use this setup very often. What you'll see is either the LS base or the JZ base. So this is an LS base for the DT cannon because you can see the L piece is used here and the S piece is used here. And then this is a JZ base. You can see why it's called that. So this basically depends on which one comes first, but you can almost always use one of these two openings for your DT cannon. The stable component in pretty much any of these openings are that you have an O piece in the corner here, and that you use one set of LNJs in the actual setup, right? So you see an LJ in the setup, LJ in the setup, and the other setup LNJs are generally used for the overhang. Okay. This one at the bottom here, I couldn't actually find on the wiki. Most of these pages I find on the wiki, but this is the one that I use a lot. I don't know what variation it's called because I couldn't find it on the wiki. I guess I'll just call it the Wawi variation or something. I don't know, but I'm sure someone's been doing it before me. I really like this one just because if you start off with an S and a Z piece, it can be hard to do any other opening, and so this is a really good bailout for that scenario in particular. You've probably seen me do this opening a lot if you've watched a lot of my self-commentated games. And it's probably the first opening that I ever memorized. Just because when I was first starting out in Tetris, I just really hated when I started out with the Z and S piece, and so I wanted to come up with something to solve for that scenario. Yeah, so that's the basic setup. So let's talk about how to follow up afterwards. The most natural follow up is that you would either do a T-spin mini or just soft drop an L piece, because you get left with this little bit of a notch here, right? You can see this notch. And so to just T-spin mini or drop an L piece there, you can just go straight into Tetris stacking, which continues your back-to-back bonus. You can spin a Z piece in there as well, but then you would lose your back-to-back bonus, so that's not preferable. As a pseudo counter to 4-wide combos, you can start stacking up for a side 4-wide with this notch. And you can actually do this before you execute the actual DT cannon. So once you have like one of the setups, so if I go back, so if you have like this setup, I could just like continue building here and save the 2 T's for when they start sending me garbage, and then the DT cannon itself will be the first 2 combos for the side 4-wide, which is interesting. That's another follow-up. If you get a quick L and J piece afterwards, you can do a C spin. Or if you end up wasting a T piece at some point, you can actually do the C spin before you do the setup. So that would be the example here. But if you executed the DT cannon first, you could still put this L and J piece in the same place and do the C spin afterwards. You could do a downstack combo after the second T-spin, and so that would be in this scenario, instead of soft dropping this L piece here, you could spin a Z in there, and then just do a basic downstack combo. I think doing a downstack combo is probably the most common thing that you will do afterwards, especially in Puyo Puyo Tetris, because it's important to keep a pretty clean field in that game, since downstacking takes a long time, and it's pretty bad if you get into a dicey situation in that game. And so I think most of the time you would probably end up doing a just a downstack combo and then go into the middle game. If you really want to swag out, there are some examples down here of ways in which you can possibly get a perfect clear after the DT cannon. I know Amimaya does this more frequently than I thought was possible, so I guess it is something that you can go for. But the basic premise is you want to build up to 10 lines and then fill in from there if you see a perfect clear opportunity. That takes incredible foresight, and even if you have incredible foresight, it takes a lot of luck on top of that, so I don't necessarily recommend going for this, but just know that it's something you can do to if you see the opportunity, and if you manage to do it, obviously it sends an insane number of lines, and so definitely go for it if you can. So DT cannons can be used not just as an opening, but also as a mid-game spike that you can set up. For the most part, if you're doing 6-3 stacking, these examples that I found online are not 6-3 stacking; they're 7-2. But you know, if you're 6-3 stacking, I think it comes up a little bit more often. But in general, you want to look for this shape where you have like where you have 2 grounded stacks next to your T-spin, and then 1 notch above here. So once you have that, then you know that you can go for this setup if you have an L and a J piece in combination that you can see in your next piece queue. If you don't have that, then it will probably take too long to set up, and it's probably not worth going for a mid-game DT cannon unless you see that your opponent has severely misdropped and you have all the time in the world to set it up. And I guess you can still go for it. Once you get more once you get more comfortable with the general pattern for DT cannons, then instead of always going for this kind of setup, you can get more creative. You can see on the right here, there's a little bit of a different thing that doesn't use the J piece as an overhang. But if you're not used to the setup yet, I would recommend almost always just going for the LJ overhang. Also, what's nice about the mid-game DT cannon is that if they unexpectedly deal with their misdrop or are sending you lots of lines, you can do something called a purple rain attack, where, as you can see, this is the start of the setup up here. But if you get the T pieces early and you want to immediately start canceling garbage, you can clear this as a T-spin single, and then the next T will be a T-spin mini, and then you're sort of bailed out from there. And it actually sets up pretty nicely afterwards for a T-spin double. So in this case, this piece would be the T-spin single, this piece would end up being the T-spin mini, and then you could put this O piece right here as an overhang, and it'll end up being a T-spin double afterwards. So that's kind of nice. So that's all for DT cannons. In terms of information, please stick around because I'm going to demonstrate how you can do it from a lot of different starting bags in a second. But if all you needed was the basic information, then go ahead and close the tutorial. Next tutorials I'm gonna make are probably gonna be TKI tutorial and ST stacking. I might do one on Tetris vs. Puyo matchup. I need to get better at it first though. I'm not very good at the matchups. I don't feel comfortable teaching it yet. Definitely go watch Amimaya Tayo. I'm really bad at saying his name. Amimaya Tayo's videos if you want to see a lot of DT cannons in use. He gets the perfect clear an insane number of times. So definitely go check that out if you want to see examples of super high level players doing DT cannons in general. Also, I know Chopin does a lot of mid-game ones along with the Jamba, and so you can look out for those as well. But I don't know if Chopin's played in a long time, so I don't know if you can even find many modern videos of him. But anyway, so let me just go over to Jastrus real quick. And I can show you guys some examples of how I look for DT cannons if I'm going to start as an opening. So I definitely want to make sure I look for the base. So in this case, since this L piece is coming super quickly, I'm definitely going to use that one as the base. The O piece is always going to go in the corner, so you can pretty much ignore that. But I want to make sure I set up this base as quickly as possible, because until I do, this T piece will never have a place to be. And I don't want to waste more than one T piece in the opening, and so I want to make sure I create this base as soon as possible. So that's the first thing that I'm looking for when I set up the DT cannon. The next thing I want to do is make sure that I'm only using one J and L in the setup. So now I've used one J and L in the setup. It would be a mistake here for me to put this next L piece over on the side here, because I want to start setting up the overhang as quickly as possible so that this T piece can be used for the actual DT cannon and not for some other shenanigans and gets wasted, right? So I'm going to immediately set up that overhang, and then the next J piece is also used as the overhang, and from here we have a DT cannon. So in order to execute the DT cannon, we're going to soft drop it, and we're going to rotate it twice counterclockwise, and then soft drop it one more time, and then rotate it again counterclockwise. So 1, 2, soft drop, 2. And then once again, I want to press space right after I rotate the block so that we get rid of that lag time. So I'll do this one a little bit faster. 1, 2, space, right? So that's how we set it up. So let's look at another example. So here we have the S piece and the Z piece. So this is the opening that I first memorized, right? And so for this one, I would put the O in the corner as usual, and I end up with this setup. Unfortunately, does this not work out? Yeah, okay, so this one doesn't actually work out. I thought originally that this would end up being a DT cannon, but I ended up messing up and wasting a piece here. But this will still end up being a DT cannon, I just wasted an extra T. So let's go ahead and look at another example. So in this one, the L and S is jumping out as the base here. It's really nice in this case that the T isn't even on the next piece Q, so I could even do the other setup here and it wouldn't make a difference. So even though it's not optimal, if I wanted to and I like accidentally placed it this way instead, it'll still end up being a DT cannon just because the T is coming so late. But I think it was safer in this scenario to do the L and the S. So always try to look for that base as soon as possible. So then this is another DT cannon. I executed a little bit quicker that time, but it's the same general trend. In this case, in a real game, I would probably build up more just because of the way that the blocks came, but you can execute this DT cannon if you want. That's not really the topic of this video. So once again, what's the base? Well, the base looks like it's going to be a J plus a... Oh, will it? Yeah, it'll probably be a J plus a Z. So we're going to place this here. And then, oh, it actually won't be. Alright, wait. Let's ignore that. So here it's going to be a J plus a Z, right? So we're going to place this here. And this is in the corner as usual. And then from here we have our DT cannon, right? And then we would continue stacking, end up with T-spin triple at the end as normal. Right, so what I was explaining about transitioning into the 4-wide, so let's just do a quick example of that, I guess. So if I just have, oops, misdropped. So if I just have a regular DT cannon setup, which what's the best way to do it in this situation? Something like this, right? So once I have this set up, oftentimes against 4-wides, it can be nice to just continue stacking, and then once they start sending their 4-wide, what'll happen is the first couple lines that they send while you're sending the DT cannon are going to end up sending you lines in Puyo Puyo Tetris because the way the canceling garbage works. And so once you execute this, then you'll actually be able to do like more than a 4-wide, I guess, is the idea. Because once you execute the 4-wide, if you already have garbage lines down here, then you can use those. And executing the DT cannon creates space for those garbage lines so you won't get KO'd. And so it can be a useful tool to counter 4-wides. Right. So that's all I have for you guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be making another video soon. Let me know in the comments what other tutorials you guys want to see, and I'll see if I can do it. So, bye.